can still access. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our statewide WalkMassachusetts network meetings. Today, we have folks in the room who are just interested in taking part in learning more about how you can best utilize GIS to support the work that folks are doing to move walkability forward. And maybe like if you're interested in utilizing GIS to support your pedestrian advocacy work, we have Professor Sumeeta in the room, and she is going to share her insights around utilizing GIS, and she's actually a board member too. So we're so happy to have her plug in and connect with us to share her knowledge and information. And she has a presentation, but we'll also open it up towards the second part to just have a conversation around how to best utilize GIS and to get some tips and tricks from her, and just have a more open dialogue around the topic. But I'll hand it off to you, Sumeeta.
I will share my screen. I hope you'll all be patient with me. I have lost some of my Zoom skills, I think consciously, because I'd never enjoyed it, Zoom teaching. And they seem to have moved the button since I last went to Zoom. But I'm Sumeeta, and I teach GIS and spatial thinking related courses at Tufts University in the Department of Urban and Environmental Policy and Planning. I've spent a lot of time thinking about ways in which GIS is useful for the kinds of work that I do, not maybe enough time on how all of you are doing it. So, feel free to stop me and say, that doesn't make sense at any point during this presentation. So I will start out with sort of outlining where I'm going. It's always difficult, especially for somebody who's a teacher, to do something within half an hour. I feel like I have to teach you everything I know. So I will try to restrain myself. So geographic information is what GI stands for in GIS, but the S is where we have a few debates, let's say. So traditionally it's called systems, but there's also a strong feeling amongst geographers, and especially, that it's also a science. And we'll see later what I mean by both of those. So we will talk about that. So we'll talk about GIS as a system and GIS as science. We'll look at some examples, not every possible example of analysis within systems and science. And we will look at, perhaps, if we have time, multiple demos about that will start to develop the idea of spatial thinking in the context of a walk audit. And then hopefully we'll have time to brainstorm other ways in which we can use this spatial thinking in advocating for our communities and for our organizations, doing whatever it is that we want to do to make cities and places, or any kind of place, better or more livable. So GIS, as I said before, when you're thinking about it as systems, has been defined as something that stores, analyzes, visualizes data for geographic positions on the Earth's surface. And as a science, geographers think of it as a way in which you examine spatial relationships, patterns, and trends in geography. So you can see already from the picture here on the right that we're thinking layers, sort of a sandwich of layers. So we're trying to put together all these different parts of a place that will help us understand it better. So in this picture, where we're thinking of GIS as a system, we have data from these multiple layers. We have street data, we have buildings data, we have vegetation data, and that helps put together our understanding of, say, one of these houses and how it's different from some of the other houses. Or perhaps along a particular road that you see in this segment, how is it different in this part of the study area, and how is it different here? what difference does greenery, and I'm sure on a day like this, we all wish there was more greenery while we were walking around, in particular, we've now put together analytically, even though GIS hasn't really done much for us, an understanding of what makes this place, which is here, different from this place, which is here in terms of the greenery. So when we do GIS, this is probably what you're thinking of. The people who do GIS, the analysts who look at maps and who are spending way too much time looking at this computer screen. But there's also these kinds of people who are going out there collecting data, putting it together, recording it, so to say, and then converting it into the types of maps that you then see on the computer or on the walls. So one very sort of typical thing that we do with GIS, and in this case I'm showing screenshots from ArcGIS Pro, which is a software that I use to teach, not because I like it, but because that's what employers want. And here in geocoding, you could start from a table that looks like this. So in this table, you're seeing, there's a date for a crash, there's the day of the week, the community in which it happened, the address, and the state. And then you have it for a list of all of, and these are all actually pedestrian crashes in the year 2023. So looking at this, it seems plausible that you could make this into a map, right? I'm sure you, why do you think that way actually? Why do you think this could become a map? And you can unmute or you can put it in the chat, whatever works for you.
For me, there is an address available. So I feel like that gives you geographic information.
Absolutely. You're exactly right. The address, right? It's a geo-reference. So it's a reference to a place. So we all understand addresses. Now, if we were for some other planet or some other country, actually, we might not understand what that means. But here in this context, I think many of us understand this idea of an address. And we certainly, if we had a system or a geographic dictionary of some kind, it would know that Sharon is a place within Massachusetts, the state, and that we have a way of putting, if we knew where all the streets were and which part of a street has that particular number or is likely to have that particular number 90, we would be able to put that and show it as a set of points. So if you take this to a typical GIS like ArcGIS Pro, you could see what the interface might look like. It will say, what do you want to map? And yes, just like Yolanda pointed out, we have an address, we have community, we have state. Then it says, because it's an expensive software, which costs a lot of money, and it's going to charge you a little bit more to do what you're going to do with it, which is geocode these addresses and make them points. It will say, do you mind this extra 2.76 credits? And I will say yes, because Tufts was paying for it. And then it will go through the process of geocoding. And very rapidly, like in a few seconds, it will have matched 64 addresses, which is 92.75% of my data, and find 5 tied locations. And I could go back and rematch it. But 92 is really good. So I will stick to it. Though when I actually did this for the crash report, I did go back and match those 5 tied ones. And so I went from here to something that looks like this. So now I have those points that are on a map, which started out very simply from this table. Okay? So this is one of the ways in which you could use GIS as a system, right? Just to create data for yourself. So if I then go on to thinking about how can I do this without ArcGIS, here's one way you could do it, which is reasonably inexpensive as long as you have less than 500 addresses. I just go to batchgeo.com and then I put in these, copy and paste the addresses, and you can see that in the background. And then I will set the options, validate them the same way. I will say the location. For location, use address. For the city, use community. For state, use state. And you can see the rest of the data showing up here. And then I will ask it to email it to me at a particular email. I could make it public if I wanted to. I will save the map, and then it will, point me to a link, and I can go here, and that's what it looks like. So you can see this table again has become a set of points on a map. It's in Google Maps right now. I can export it to what it says Google Earth, but that's really a format. It's going to export it as what's called a KML, a keyhole markup language file. And then I can use that result in other things, in actual GIS, like ArcGIS Pro that I showed before, or I could do more analysis with it within other, types of almost GIS, like ArcGIS Online, about which I will talk a little bit later. So essentially, we, in using GIS, have to work with spatial data, and that's something that can be mapped. It's a layer, like I mentioned before. And then we might have multiple layers, and the process of putting together those multiple layers is what is going to help me do some analysis with it. So you've already seen how you can go from those tables to a point layer that was based on the addresses, but I could also make lines or polygons. So lines like, roadways or paths that I'm going to take, or polygons. I could get data, or I could make my own polygons showing a particular place, or data from the census showing particular types of spatial units that the census come up with, like census tracts or zip codes. There's also something called a raster that I could use in GIS, which is a little bit less accessible in a sense, because it begins to require you to start understanding more about how analysis works. So here is an example of the types of analysis you could do with rasters, which are somewhat related to the kinds of things we care about. Say, for example, each of these that you're seeing is a raster. So think of it sort of like a grid. So I put together the multiple types of grid here to come up with a sense of what's the shortest path from one place to another, for example. So if that didn't make sense, maybe this will, but here, let's say I'm in Nigeria, and I have these two villages. One is the village of Masui, and the other is the village of Magami. And you can see all these clinics in the background. Those are the clinics that somebody might have to walk to if they were in need of medical help. And so if I had a raster based on how much slope, or how steep is it, I'm sure, I know many of you are probably walkers. You know that it's harder to climb a hill than to walk on flat ground, right? Some of us, like me, for example, look for hills so that we can get our heart rate up. But some of us mostly want to avoid it, especially if we want to go to the doctor and, we need to walk all the way there. So if we just looked at the straight line distance, then you would the way to go would probably be these red or orangish lines that you see. So that would be the closest clinic. That's what my software will do for me based on simply, as the crow flies. And if, on the other hand, I was using another raster that you're seeing underlying this, that's the raster for slope, or, how much the elevation is changing, I would actually go to this clinic because it's much flatter. The path getting there is much flatter. So you can see the yellow path on top is, there's much less elevation change than the red path at the bottom, which is a lot more elevation change, which means it's more hilly. So this is an example of how you could be using GIS as an analytical tool. So we're going from just putting points to thinking about how do I connect these 2 points and which is the best way to go. Here's another example from the more analytical point of view. So the green points that you're seeing on both maps are the opioid treatment programs. These are, say, think of them again as clinics. And the little orange, somewhat harder to see polygons that you see around them are how anybody who is within that orange can get to this opioid treatment or the closest opioid treatment program within half an hour by, in this case, on the left, you're seeing it's transit, public transportation plus walking. On the right, it's just walking. So one thing that struck me when I look at this map is, thanks to the MBTA, you might as well just walk everywhere, because waiting for the bus, it seems like you would probably consume a lot more time. And so you can see the smaller red dots are antecedents. So there's a lot of the MBTA region where you can't get to the closest program, OTP program, within half hour, I guess, is what this map is saying. Here we're comparing drive time and walking time, and that's even more stark. So for example, if you zoom into Springfield, all the greens that you're seeing are places that are accessible to the closest OTP, or the opioid treatment location, within half hour. And the brown is where you can drive within half hour. So clearly, walking is not optimal almost anywhere in Massachusetts for getting to a treatment clinic. Now, as analysis, as a science, you can go much further than that. So here are some maps that come from models where we're looking at MBTA ridership, so which places are retaining ridership post-COVID. You can see what, through models, we found that since COVID, being on a key bus route, that is some of the bus routes that have been designated as key, which have much higher frequency, those places are much more likely to retain ridership. And some of our analysis looks like this, which doesn't look like GIS or spatial or maps at all, but they are coming from spatial data. So analysis can go off in a very different direction when we start thinking about GIS as a sort of science, place to look for relationship. What makes, what matters, what predicts something, or how do you model something? So I wanted to go back to the blackboard, so to say, and I had a conversation with Yolando maybe 10 days ago or a week ago, and we were talking about the way in which he and others at WalkMass are thinking about things like walk audits. So here is, for example, something that he shared with me, which is sort of the beginning of a walk audit, or at least one way to, formally think of a walk audit is, of course, it has a place. You have the start of a walk, end of a walk, definitely spatial, and then you record these things about it. Then he talked about getting data from the Mass DOT, data that where it says download, you can download and then look at it in a traditional GIS, but you can also interactively look at it within their dashboard. And then, of course, he also talked about making or drawing these lines that become part of the walk route or the walk audit route. And all of these are ways of doing spatial thinking, really, right? We're looking at the context, we're trying to think about what is this place like, and we're layering data in from, say, the road inventory, but also our knowledge of the location through Street View, perhaps. What does this place look like? So one thing that almost immediately struck me is that you're collecting a lot of data. And so there are possibly ways in which we could record this data, not in the way that we may be currently recording it, but in a way which is GIS friendly. And so all of this, the questions that you ask about a place, this is all data. Okay, each of these is what we would call an attribute for a street or a street segment or for a sidewalk. So you could record it as tables. You could say, for each of these street segments, what am I finding? What does it look like? And this could be very different from what DOT or somebody else is storing about that location, because they are maybe making data once in a while. We, in going there every day, for example, those of us who are walking on these streets are finding things that may be very different from what the DOT is recording once in a few years. So I could take some of this data into ArcGIS, and I could look at it like this. So let me start sharing what ArcGIS looks like. So let's see, we go in to ArcGIS Pro. Can you see my screen, I hope?
Yeah, we can see the ArcGIS
Oh,
platform.
excellent. So in ArcGIS Pro, it's going to look like this, right? I imported the KML that you can save from Google Maps, as I said before, what they call the Google Earth format. And then now you can see in the catalog here, I have my walk audit route for Alewife that Yolanda shared with me as a KML here, right? So I can then bring in the road inventory and then see, let me click on this road, and it tells me something about that particular road, what type of road, how much left shoulder, right shoulder, all that stuff that they have recorded here. I can also change my base map. So I can make this base map be just a plain one or a different type of, all these options that I have. I can look at it in 3D and, do fancy stuff with the arc scene here. But all of this is really expensive. And let me be frank, it is something that you will forget almost as soon as you learn it, unless you do it every day, which is what I tend to do every day. So why not use some of the tools that are already there and which are free? And so one such tool is Google Earth, right? So I could go to Google Earth, and I'm just pretty trying to find Google Earth on my thing here and not finding it. Let me go back to the PowerPoint where I did record some of the Google Earth videos. But I could go to Google Earth and I could say, again, I have that KML here. I can see it in 3D. I can go into a particular location and then see here what it looks like, right? I can just keep going along the path that Yolanda shared with me. Or I could come up with my own particular points. So I could go in, say, to my neighborhood in Newton Corner, again, looking at it in 3D, and I created my own point there, which you can see as an X, and then I'm going to that location. And then I can, again, record the context here by looking at that particular crossing, looking at the quality of the sidewalk, and say, zooming into particular places of interest here, that stair that I would have to lug my bike over to get across the highway, or my choice is the really broken sidewalk in a dangerously high-speed location where people are getting off the highway or completely confused. It's also called the Ring of Death or something, some weird name, which it completely deserves. So it's just a question of being able to pull in the KML that you create yourself, which is not very hard to create, and you can then, find a somewhat more interactive way of looking at it without really needing the GIS. You can also do this in ArcGIS Online, which is an ArcGIS Pro lighter version. I believe many organizations find it much more affordable in terms of if you even wanted to get, access to it. So it does many of the things that which I showed you in ArcGIS Pro, which you can also do in ArcGIS Online. And it's a web-based version, so you obviously need good internet. So let me again try and share the ArcGIS Pro window. For some reason, it's not letting me show my Chrome window.
Maybe you're sharing yeah, I would click the share button again and try to see if you can sometimes you could either share a whole screen or just a certain window.
Oh, yeah, let me see. I hope I didn't. Yes, let me try again my share. I'm seeing everything except the one that I want. Let me see. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah, we see the Zoom screen.
Zoom screen?
Yeah, and
Okay.
we see now you're opening up Google.
Yeah.
Um, I
This
think
is
Map.
Google Maps. This is sort of going back to what I would want to show. Like I can make points here or routes like Yolanda shared, and then I can go to Google Earth and then do this thing that I already showed you. Or I could go to Google ArcGIS Online, which is something like this. So you can see a version of something that I already shared, which we have from our crash report. If you most likely when you get, so you could go to arcgis.com and then you can make yourself I think an account. Here I'm going through Tufts, so mine will show you that I'm logged in here. And I can add things here, right? So I can browse layers if I already have them, but you probably don't. Or I can add from the content that I already created or from other places, right? So I could go to ArcGIS Online and I could say, look at other things that I'm interested in, say like other people's walk audits. So here you can see people have shared other things that, some of these could be interesting. So let's see this Palm Beach one that I looked at before, and I can add to the map. And I can zoom in to there. And you can see that they have collected data for this part of Palm Beach. And so if I click on one of these, it will show me what they collected, which is an interesting thing to collect. They have a photograph there. Then here, they're just, so this is all data. You could actually look at these places and either put pictures or your own attributes for what's important there. You can also add other layers. So if I go back to my original one here, so this is sort of the equivalent of what I showed you in ArcGIS Pro, except I got this environmental justice block groups. I have the Mass DOT inventory. So I know that a lot of this is in a minority environmental justice block group. And I could, do other things that you like to do. So you can see the legend here. You can then go in here and save it and then share it with someone. And then that sharing will, look something like this. So they can open it in their own map viewer. And so there's a lot of things that you can't do in a traditional GIS that you could do in ArcGIS Online. I'm pretty sure WalkMass has its own account, but as an individual as well, you can create accounts. I'm pretty sure you get a free trial. So I will now go back to my PowerPoint and talk about what else we might be able to do. So we did that, and we're here. So I talked about how you can record things in ArcGIS Online and then open it up, but you also have a mobile version. So there's something called ArcGIS Field Maps, which again, expensive, as I said before, but there's other open source software like EpiCollect. It's called EpiCollect because it's mostly done for epidemiologists use it, but it works very similarly to ArcGIS Pro's equivalent field maps. And of course, I didn't even talk about story maps, which is an excellent way in which you can share some of these things. So here is one example that I wanted to share. I'm not sure you can see what I'm sharing. Can you see what I'm sharing?
No, we just see
Okay,
the slides. So.
let me go back to here. Can you see that?
Yeah, we see the story maps
Okay.
page.
Excellent. So here is a story map about a walk audit, and then you can see that, besides the pictures, you can also share maps as you can from Google Earth and other type of maps. If you do it in ArcGIS online, if you look at our crash report, the WalkMass crash report has a lot of web maps that were created in ArcGIS online. So there's a lot of potential in how we can use spatial thinking to, convert some of what we do into data and then share it with others, or also simply use it for analytical purposes to better understand the context in which we're working, the kinds of things that are very much happening locally but are not recorded by those sort of statewide types of data sets that we use. And of course, lastly, I just wanted to sort of open it up to brainstorming about other ways in which we can, work on incorporating this type of spatial thinking into what we do as advocates for our communities. One thing that I often think about is training. So how could we sort of involve local libraries or nonprofits or other organizations in better training about spatial thinking? Because having had 2 children go through the local public schools, I feel that it's definitely something we don't teach well enough. And of course, I have a lot of students at college who come in wishing they had learned more geography. And of course, data-based advocacy. So spatial data is very much part of it. As we own these data, as we collect these data, we can, be more careful about how it's shared. But I think I will stop there. Thank you very much, Yolando, for inviting me to talk. I'm happy to take questions or simply brainstorm with each other about what more we could do with GIS, whether we use it as a system-based tool or a way of thinking, the science-based tool. Thank you.
Thank you, Sumeeta. I really appreciate it. Yeah, we have a lot of activity in the chat, a lot of questions. Would love to just open it up for folks to also feel free to raise your hand and ask a question. There's some good, interesting stuff in regards to we collect a lot of qualitative data when conducting our walk audits. Rachel mentioned in the chat how there's information around how much fear of assault or folks moving around the community and having to do with different risks assault and stuff like that. How does that impact our walk audits? And we do reflect on that when we are writing our walk audit reports. But qualitative data, I feel is a harder thing to sometimes map. At least it is for me. I don't know if you have any recommendations on how to best map some of that input that we get from folks on a walk audit that might be connected to just inputs that are less qualitative and more quantitative. I mean, more qualitative and not as quantitative pieces.
Absolutely. I have a colleague who teaches qualitative GIS, and it's like most computer-based tools, we do better with quantitative. It's much more. I'm not saying we do well there either, because numbers are very misleading as well. It is very hard to compare people's perceptions qualitatively, right? What might feel safe to someone is probably not going to feel safe to someone else. And it's very difficult to put numbers on these things. There's been a lot of research on this. I'm not sure how far it's succeeded, let's say. It is, again, tends towards, if you're worried about your safety, let's put a number to it and make it a number between 1 and 5. But it doesn't get to the actual thing. So sometimes it's easier to just record it, right? So you can use multimedia with GIS and say, this is what it looks like. If you perceive it as differently than somebody else, at least you know what it looks like. So having more there is sometimes a way in which we can judge qualitatively as well. But I agree, it's hard.
This is Rachel who put the question in. I'm also talking about just getting police report violent crime data and including that, because fear of assault and risk of assault and risk of car crashes are the 2 big risks for pedestrians. And That's absolutely, we have numbers for that. So I'm just curious, where we're including that in all of this, the police reports of violent crime, which will, I assume, have locations as well. So how does that fit into all this?
I mean, at this point, we don't include it as we should because a lot of times the data is incomplete, right? I mean, we don't always know if all the data has been there. Not everybody reports crimes, and there's definitely biases in where crime gets reported. And if we had, in an ideal scenario, or access to many types of data, we could definitely be thinking of putting it as part of our spatial analysis, or part of our understanding of the place. I totally agree with you that it's missing.
Johnny, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, please go
Thank
ahead.
you so much, Sumeeta, for your presentation. Super useful and exciting to learn new skill. I'm just wondering, is there a way to sort of map shade, especially on days like this? So going back to the example that you shared, I think it was Nigeria, right? Like mapping the best route or the easiest route that doesn't include the most slope or like the least amount of incline. Is there something, how do you envision creating a map or routes for people who are consistently walking but are looking for the shadiest routes or the routes with the most like shade?
I'm actually pretty sure that somebody's already done this. But again, it's for one city. I think somewhere in Europe, I remember seeing an example of it. I can't pull it out offhand. But people are mapping things like what's the best smelling route? What's the best, most shaded route? And then again, the seasonality has to come into play there because some places don't have trees in the your leaves in the winter. But yeah, this is all definitely doable if we had the data, if we knew the canopy. So some cities like Cambridge have excellent data on trees. They know every tree, they know how much the canopy is and how much shade it will provide. I can imagine doing it very easily for Cambridge. But for other cities, it might not be so good because we don't have complete databases that record all the trees and know the type of tree and know how much canopy and height and all of that stuff. But we do have LiDAR data, which actually will record trees at one point of time. And all of this, in theory, is very much doable if we had the computer power and the will and the ability combined to be able to convert that into. But it's a great, idea that should be there. I wish Google would think of doing that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's good to know that it's possible. I guess the follow-up would be like, how do you even begin to map the tree canopy or like the amount of shade that a certain tree provides?
Oh, there are tools in GIS which will do that. Like I said,
Oh,
the LiDAR type data will include like what's the height of the tree, what's the canopy, and you can very much model that thing, that, shade. And
okay.
then sort of just the example, like in the Nigeria example, that's another sort of cost, right? So lack of shade is a cost. We can add that into our raster and then model how do I go from here to here with the maximum amount of shade.
Mhm.
It's GIS are built to solve problems like that if you have that data.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, that was, yeah, cool. I think it was the Barcelona one that I was mentioning. You're right.
I think I saw some other hands at one point, not virtual hands. I would think it was like actually, I don't know, Tony, I think I saw your hand at one point. Uh, or maybe you were just you just had it up.
Yeah, there's
But
some great examples of story maps and shade map and other things that are on the chat. So yes, I would definitely look at those. So I think Abby has a question. What platform and mobile tool would you recommend for your average municipal pedestrian committee? EpiCollect, I would start with EpiCollect. Unless you have access to ArcGIS Pro through your city, where you can then use the field maps that connects much more easily with the ArcGIS Online.
And I guess, Sumeeta, is there anything that is like story maps, but like a competitor, or like a maybe more free or more accessible for folks?
There's something called, I think mentioned it in the, I may have gone through that slide too fast, but Map Store is an example of that. There are, of course, other things like Leaflet and, Python tools, which are actually very hard to actually figure out if you don't know any coding. But Map Store, I think, is a reasonably accessible product, which is Story Map-like. You can use, I think Story Map doesn't require you to, well, actually, I take that back. I think you do need a account to be able to use story maps, but that account may be, part of a free trial.
Great. Elizabeth, I see you just unmuted. So.
Sorry. Yeah, I guess I just wanted to circle back to the discussion about qualitative mapping, because I've been thinking about data sovereignty quite a bit lately, where, I'm working on a Vision Zero plan and collecting a lot of data and obviously processing and trying to look at all of the input that we get both from the crash reports, which would be more quantitative, and then anecdotal information, and thinking about how the communities could end up using all of this data, or how can we create platforms that then would really help. Because one of the issues that we've heard from our municipal staff members is really that they don't have as much capacity, and that local advocates can really have the most impact in moving projects forward. But I think that the qualitative aspect it's sort of a lower barrier to entry for a few different reasons. And so I just wanted to, like, circle back and mention it. Something about that's been on my mind is just keep thinking about who the end user for the data and for the maps are, and really wanting to make sure that could be accessible to the people who it would affect the most, which would be, the residents. And I really appreciate your, sharing these resources that also would be a lower cost, because I think that's, also been pretty prohibitive too, in this work. So I just, I really appreciate that, and wanted to just share these thoughts that I don't necessarily have a great mapping solution, but that's been on my mind.
Oh, I mean, I totally appreciate it. So a story from, let's say, my life is that when a few years ago, I moved to Newton, and then I live on a very busy street, and there is my children's school, they had to cross the street to get to it. And so I went to the city, and the time that they have these long meetings, and then you get your chance to talk. And the city engineer was there. It was 11 p.m. at night. And I asked, I had already done an analysis of what all the kinds of questions they were asking. It's like, can we put a pedestrian crossing there? Can somebody crossing there be viewed from far enough? Because there's a turn coming in. So is the visibility going to be good enough? There's also, so I did the analysis, like I used GIS and did all sorts of fancy things. And then finally I went there and shared all of that. And the city engineer said, oh, I just don't think we have the money to paint stripes across that, because that was the only thing left, right? The money to paint the stripes, because the analysis they couldn't object to the analysis. So even with somebody like me with a PhD coming in and advocating for myself and my community, it turned out to be like a bucket of paint. I can buy that paint, let me buy that paint. And it's like, no, that will not work. And I'm talking about a wealthy city, right? What happened is 10 years after that, my children were already in college, they did paint that. So it was possible and ultimately did happen, but it took 10 years for that to happen. So I'm really worried for communities which don't have this, where you don't have people complaining all the time that my kid cannot cross the street, where, it boils down to not even data actually.
Yeah, and I think that also where we're working is not just certain communities that are very low income, but also may really feel rightly threatened by the amount of data that's being collected because of maybe vulnerable immigration status or other factors that, I think that it is important to be very transparent about how the data can be used and is used, and then also to make sure that those channels of participation are as available as possible. And I'm not sure that throughout this process, I think we're learning a lot as we're going through it, but
Yeah, I mean, I think as like, Rachel mentioned before in the chat as well, the car crash and, risk of walking, all of those things may be less reported by people who are worried about their immigration status or other issues. So yeah, our data are going to be incomplete, and we're trying to do the best with what we have. And it still may not be enough.
Thanks, Sumeeta. Yeah, that's all really good stuff. Do we have other questions that folks want to elevate? I know I'm interested in seeing how we could like best utilize it, also like use GIS also just in regards to like advocacy pieces. Like post a walk audit or just to move other like policy work forward. You mentioned like, yeah, you shared your Newton example of like trying to use GIS in that way. I don't know if there's other ways that we can like utilize data and utilize these maps to like move policy forward, and if you have any recommendations in regards to that.
I hesitate to recommend anything because I am obviously a very particular point of view, and I think it should always be coming from, well, I'm also part of a community, but I'm probably thinking only the kinds of things that affect me and not the kinds of things that, affect other communities. I mean, we do have shared concerns, like we want our children to get to school safely, and that means, worrying about traffic and worrying about the huge SUVs that have taken over our roads. I think since COVID, I see a lot more kids in my community walking around, which I think is great. But I also worry for them because I don't think the drivers have improved since COVID. So for me, looking at these safety issues, making sure these pedestrian crossings are in place, and that even for somebody like me, as I grow older, if I, for example, need to walk to a bus stop safely and I walk more slowly, then, like I showed you the example of those sidewalks, or if I'm taking my bike and I have to cross 90 to get to Watertown and park my bike there. I have those are all very personal to me, and then I can report that to somebody. And I'm sure if we talk to 10 other people from 10 other communities or from my own, we will all share very different experiences based on where we live. And so I feel like a lot of what we advocate for should come from the grassroots, like from people who live there and who worry about their individual lives and improving it for everyone as well.
And Yolando, this is Betsy. The reminder that this information will all be available through the Walk Massachusetts website, so that when we want to go back to these different programs and information, we'll be able to access it through the website in a couple days.
Yeah, thanks, Betsy. Yeah, it's great that we record these and make them available for folks outside. And there's a lot of great links here too that folks have posted in the chat, and I'll reflect with the team to see how we can like grab some of these different links and connect it to that recording, so that's easy for folks just to open stuff up and access some of the different resources. Yeah, there's just so much out there. So it's like I think this conversation is a good place to like consolidate it all and at least have folks move in the same direction and like expedite the whole process of like creating these maps that can help us out in our individual works. Yeah, thanks, Sumeeta. I really appreciate this, and I'm excited to start to dig into some of the free and open source resources that you shared.
Yeah, I'm hoping that in the future we might able to do short workshops and, maybe play with these tools ourselves. So, like I said, some of these have free trials. We could maybe try those or work with other organizations that may already have these tools. And so I feel like it's important. The training is really important piece here that, I can show you all the wonderful things it can do, but to do it yourself is very scary, even for my students, even during the course of a class, a semester-long class.
Yeah, some people learn from doing instead of just like hearing or
All
seeing.
people learn from doing, I think.
True, yeah. Great.
Well, feel free to contact me. I mean, I'm sure if you Google me, you'll find my email. I'm happy to share more resources and more training videos or anything else you need to get you started.
Will do. Thanks everyone for joining us today, and yeah, we'll reconvene again next month. But we really appreciate Sumeeta's time and sharing all this great insight.
Yeah, it's totally my pleasure. Thank you, Yolanda, and Betsy, and everybody else with WalkMass.
Cool. All right. Enjoy the rest of your day, y'all.
Yep. Bye, everyone.